excited to be here once again with Nalini. And the topic of today is a little bit complicated. I'm not sure if you've heard of Plaid. They are big, but they are emblematic of a larger market shift and probably what we're going to see more of in the next decade. So I thought it was useful, and Nalini certainly has opinions about this as well, for us to talk about this shift and maybe some practical lessons about what we can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
We are not going to talk about several things, and we'll be really careful about that. And we encourage people asking questions. Let's keep that out as well. They're much bigger conversations, but we're going to be real focused today. So we're not going to get into web browsing privacy, cookies, and all that stuff. We're not going to get into some of the incentive structures of market brokers. We're not going to get into policy and various regulatory regimes that could make this better or how it's done in the EU, however tempting that might be. And we're also not going to talk about the impact on the equivalent data protections for businesses, because I'll just state right now, there aren't any.
Yeah. In the United States. And we're focused on the US. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. Nalini, did I forget anything?
No. We wanted to talk about some really practical implications, because tools like Plaid can be very handy, right? For those of us that have multiple financial institutions and we want to see financial snapshots for either our personal finance or our business finance. And Plaid, amongst others, is very good at making those connections.
Yeah. Most of us have probably used their services without realizing they connect financial institutions together. All right, let's start. Nalini, how about you start us off by briefly explaining GLBA and what it was intended to do and how it has aged.
Graham-Leach-Bliley Act was meant to do a lot of things in terms of holding financial institutions, specifically banks, retail banks, in check. As it pertains to today, one of the things that it does is it says, banks, you can't be data brokers. You cannot sell your customers' information. So I want to stop there because there's a lot to the reporting and to requirements.
Yes. But in particular, ostensibly, it means practically, for most people, it means your bank cannot sell your transaction history, how much is in your bank account,
right?
How many overdrafts you got in the last couple months, to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And if they share it, it has to be to like a vendor in fulfillment of their commitments to their customers.
Right. It has to be a bona fide service provider as per California, Colorado, and other states.
Sure.
Understanding. But that doesn't mean that they don't have fun.
Sure.
With data themselves, and also by virtue, in my estimation, with partner organizations, right? Think about co-branded credit cards, where some semblance of data is being used because they are focusing efforts on cardholders for other products besides those from a particular institution. But generally, it was meant to be a super protective measure so that we're not spied on with financial data and not discriminated against as a result.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. So the world moves on.
Yep.
And there have many other companies have arisen around the financial services industry that help banks get around that.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about some of your experiences, or summarize how that sometimes happens.
Well, it starts off innocently enough, right? You have a personal financial management tool, um, YNAB, you need a budget, or Quicken, or what have you. And you want to be able to import your transactions. And it used to be that you'd have to make an individual connection to each of your financial institutions. Today, with tools like Plaid, you connect to the Plaid platform, and it does the connections. It's very secure. That's the good news. To render or even to import, right? It can actually help handle data transfers into your personal application. What it also does is it keeps track of all of your financial transactions. I was doing some research. There's even like payroll, employee, employer stuff that they retain. And it's akin to some point of sale systems that many of you are probably intimately familiar with because you buy bread, right? You buy things like Square and what's the other one? It'll come to me.
Stripe, Clover,
Stripe, and there's another one.
Toast,
Square. Yeah, all of them. And they're all siphoning off your data because they're not financial institutions in and of themselves. So they're not subject to GLBA. And they do all kinds of things with that data.
So let me make this a little bit more explicit. I am here in You Need a Budget, and it says, would you like to connect your Capital One account or your, I don't know, Bank of America account or whatever, MasterCard or something?
Chase.
Chase. And then you say, yeah, that sounds like a good deal. I don't have to mess around with Excel files anymore, importing. You're just going to keep it accurate, right? And they say, yes, in fact, it'll always be accurate up to the minute or something close to that. And will never fail. And they say, just click this button, and you click the button, and it says, do you authorize this broker, like You Need a Budget, to access your bank details, your transaction history, powered by Plaid? And do you authorize Plaid? And of course, there's a long contract. And what you're saying is that because Plaid, or probably You Need a Budget, but primarily Plaid, does not have a contractual or regulatory duty to protect the person who's clicking through in their transactions, they are taking a copy of all of that transaction history and selling it. Or doing whatever they want. Okay.
For product improvements, that's one of my favorites.
Sure. Okay. How many people do you think this affects?
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised if it's well over 100 million people in the US.
Right. A third.
Yeah. Probably a good third, maybe even more.
Yeah. But I guess let me play devil's advocate. How I am a consumer. Well, I'm more than a consumer, but in my consumer hat, what practically can I do about it? Like, is the existence of this poor oversight on probably someone who shouldn't be selling, my purchases down at the I don't know, somewhere sketchy, to whoever wants it. Is this a new and meaningfully different change to the threat model? Like, does that data already exist out there?
Some of it probably does, but the more that we add to it and let these entities know our spending patterns, our location, because Plaid also works on mobile devices, and they got caught red-handed and settled in 2022 for collecting more information than they needed for $58 million. But unfortunately, it still doesn't protect the individual, right? Maybe you get $1.98 if you're lucky, or a credit monitoring service when something goes wrong. So practically, taking back your privacy means first going to plaid.com and doing a privacy request form to provide a copy of all your stored data. You could start there. I would also recommend, if you've previously opted in, to opt out of their faster returning user experience. And then once you've seen what they've stored, I don't know about you, but I want them to delete everything. I don't believe that having a spreadsheet is a bad idea, but that's personal preference. But at least be aware of what they're collecting. So that's number one. The second thing that you can do, and there are varying companies and cost levels for this, do a data deletion service. And I've probably mentioned this on a previous webinar. The best in the business today in the US is Obscure IQ. I have used them in conjunction with Delete Me. I've tried a number of others as well. They're not as good. I don't want to slam anybody, but those two are pretty decent. Delete Me would be a more cost-effective option. So that's a second thing to do. And then maybe we can talk about things like tokens, Dylan, and what that means. And I'll follow up with how I, at least online, I don't shop with my direct credit card. And I haven't in a few years.
Yeah. I think that it doesn't end with Plaid. I'm going to continue playing devil's advocate. Plaid is not the problem. They're not some big bad whoever. They got major competitors doing exactly the same thing. And even if we did a concerted effort to shake our finger at the CEO and he promised to, it's probably a he, promised to change his ways, someone else would pop up to leverage the same market.
Sure. It's very lucrative.
It's very, I think I saw their margins like 80% or something gross. But they're doing great. And I would further say there's a lot of ways that same transaction data can end up being sold.
Sure.
Like, I mean, my area, data theft. So many companies have my data, right? Like a service that we talked about, service providers. Bank of America is probably subcontracting out to some poor folks in Puerto Rico or Malaysia or something to do rekey, and people in low security buildings are probably looking at my stuff all day long for just to fulfill their obligations to me. And who knows how often they get hacked and nobody notices. So I think this is, for a practical consumer, this is not a game of one and done. This is a game or solve the problem. It's a game of how do you make the cost of taking advantage of you higher and more difficult than average. You're not solving the problem. You're just really reducing your exposure. Okay.
Well, first, avoid buying things online is a good start.
Sure.
always presenting a physical card that does protect you. The fraud alert systems are very good with financial institutions now. A second thing you can do is dilute the data, obfuscate the data.
Right.
So I use a service, for example, privacy.com, where all that shows up on my bank statements, on my credit card statements, is privacy.com. You don't know what I've bought. You have a dollar amount, but you don't know where and you don't know what it's for. There are other services like that as well that are reputable. The other thing you can do, it's harder, you buy gift cards and buy things on the gift cards. Spidey sense a la Michael Bissell.
Yeah. So this first strategy, privacy.com, is a great example. You're going to pay someone, and so they're incented to serve you more than whatever they can sell your data for. And so you're more confident that they're gonna act in your best interest. Okay. And so they're gonna be an intermediary between you and the systems of the world that do not have your best interests at heart.
Right. It also, in addition to obfuscates your purchase history with your financial institution, with privacy.com, you designate a card for a particular vendor. It can't be used anywhere else. So it's also a good security measure for the user.
Yeah. Let's talk about that one. What I in the cyber biz would call tokenization, which basically means numbers are just numbers. Just make up a number. Do they really need the actual number? And there are math computer tools that can make up numbers for you and then retranslate them on the fly so everything keeps working right. Virtual credit card numbers are an example of this. So I can go on to my Citi credit card number and say, create a virtual credit card number. And you can generate as many of them as you want, and you can rescind them. And this is a great way of making sure that if Comcast is sloppy about protecting your data and they lose it, and you start getting crazy bills from other people, you can just cancel it.
Yep.
Or if you don't want to argue on the phone with a Comcast service rep about canceling your service, you just cancel it, right?
Right.
And then say, well, it's your problem. You call me during these hours and you wait on hold. Other examples that I really like are, often we're asked for information about ourselves, and it's not necessary to answer truthfully.
That's
They
right.
make it sound like it is, but you go to the doctor's office, they ask for your social security number in your intake form. They don't need it.
No, they don't. And I won't provide it.
Right.
You just give a fake number.
Yeah. Or you often you can give a fake address. Companies, especially older companies, track the bill to and the ship to differently. And so if you're validating the address associated with your payment data, you can still ship somewhere else, right? So you can maintain separate addresses. It's not hard. You can use fake names. I've got a couple.
Yes, as long as you're not committing fraud to a government entity.
Yeah. Yeah. And often for legal things, you need to, but I mean, when I'm picking up my remote order Chipotle, I don't use my real name. They don't need to have my real name on the pickup for Dylan.
Nope.
Like it can say pickup for Zeke. Like there's no extra fraud associated with that change.
That's right.
Okay. You can also often add extra data or get tricky with email addresses, append things to the end. It'll still come to you. Gmail's real good at this.
Or you can use, some services. I use Fastmail. You can have aliases there. I've been a longtime user of 33 Mail, which I think is a terrific service. Same sort of idea. And, some of the worst original data brokers are magazines, right? I just put Playbill subscriber. I don't even put a name. It still gets to our address. And if it's convenient and you can afford it, don't have anything come to your home. If you really want to be private, do a post box or a PMB.
Right. And there are services, mostly marketed businesses, for like $50 a month.
Mm-hmm.
They will accept mail on your behalf and they'll scan it all to you and email it to you.
That's right.
Like, for a lot of us, that's worth the price of not shuffling through all the local circulars for roofing companies and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the last one you mentioned, Delete Me. This is an example of a larger industry, right? How does this work? Like, what's the strategy behind it?
Well, most of the consumer-based services available today, you authorize the service as your agent, and they actually go and request data deletions on your behalf. What often happens is sometimes the data broker, because it's largely data brokers, there are some services, I'll talk about the ones that scan your email in a minute. What they'll do is they'll delete your index record. They won't actually delete the body of records, number one. So you need to watch out for that. The second thing is, I don't know of any services that delete your mobile advertising data except Obscure IQ. And you can get a digital footprint by them first, and then they'll delete your data and maintain it. So you need to delete everything associated with your mobile advertising ID. It's an ME ID. Delete everything with various names, email addresses, physical addresses, and phone numbers. And I also had them delete my likenesses, all of the photos online, except the ones that I explicitly put there for a business purpose. Then there's a new crop of data services, Privacy Hawk being one of them. Incogni, I think, also does this, but I'm not positive about that. I'll have to do my homework. Where they scan your email, typically Gmail or Outlook, and they go, oh, you've bought from this person, so you need to send a data deletion request to them. They don't actually handle your data deletions very well. And I work with a number of companies who get in their privacy inbox, you need to, here's a do not sell or share request, and here's a deletion request. But then the people have to follow up themselves. So, they vary in terms of effectiveness, anywhere from a couple of hundred data brokers to the most comprehensive, as I said before, is Obscure IQ. It's, it requires a little bit of investment, but I have peace of mind now that I never had before. So I use it in conjunction with Delete Me, which is like $100 a year. Obscure IQ is more. I'll just tell you that. You can find out more going to their site.
The one that just popped up, I think, is the parent company for Delete Me.
Yes, it is. And I use other tools that they provide too. They do Sudo, I believe, as well, which is also has virtual cards, virtual phone numbers.
Yeah. So the way I would like to, I have thought about these. So I want to vet my understanding. This is not a one and done thing, because this is like data is constantly being collected about us. And there's no stopping all these data brokers from reselling old copies of that data. And so this is not so much of a bed bug eradication, bake your house sort of treatment. This is more of a every couple months I spray for termites because they're coming back. Am I on the right track with how to think
You're
about this?
totally on the right track, because new brokers come up.
Right.
You know, they're not always in the United States even, so there's some jurisdictional challenges. And you just need to keep on top of it. So
Right.
I call it data hygiene. You know, I Google myself periodically and just see what else comes up. And both Delete Me and Obscure IQ have been very responsive when I say, hey, Radaris has me again, or, you know, name your favorite service.
Right.
Can you process a request? And they do, and keep me updated.
Right. Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to summarize.
Yep. Let's close it up.
At least in America, the horse is out of the barn in terms of your data being available to lots of people. It's mostly cheap to get. It's not a lot of regulation, and the regulation that does exist has not aged very well. There are good things you can do. You can pay someone to be an intermediary between you and this whole interconnected world of people without your best interests at heart. Privacy.com is a good example. You can fake stuff. Don't fake stuff on your passport, folks. Bad idea. And you can, or you can use information faking services, such as virtual cards. Finally, you can pay a company to go spam all the data brokers and say, please delete everything you got about Nalini. It isn't going to guarantee they do it or they do it well, but you're going for volume here. And it's going to tamp down on a lot of what's out there.
And the other thing to be mindful of is don't fill out online surveys. Don't fill out warranty cards, right?
Sure.
That's still the source of, and I mentioned magazine subscriptions before. Be very careful about handing over any of your information. As you said earlier, you know, most medical offices, they don't need half the stuff they ask for.
Right.
So either don't provide it at all, leave it blank, or give them just whatever, right? The takeout people.
Right. All right.
And make sure, can you put obscureiq.com also for everyone? Because it's worth checking out. I know the founders. I think the world of what they do. I want more people to be aware of their services.
Friends in high places. You've got them. All right. Well, that's it for today, folks. We're real focused and concise on today's problem. I think there are some good jumping off points for future conversations. If any of y'all have questions or thoughts or comments, future topics you want us to cover, please hit us up. We'd be glad to answer them.
Indeed. All right. So live well and prosper, my esteemed colleague and wonderful viewers today. And we'll talk again soon.
All right. Have a wonderful Wednesday, folks.